You look back at the past and feel a tightness in your chest, don't you? As if everything you once built, the house, the car, the comfort, had turned into a memory. And now fear shows up. The fear of never being who you once were again. The fear of never regaining the standard of living you once had. I know. You try to move on, but sometimes it feels like the world has shrunk. You avoid talking about money, avoid comparing yourself to the past, avoid thinking about everything you've lost. Because deep down, there's still a voice whispering, "Will I ever be able to live like I used to?" That fear is more common than you think, especially after 40, when time seems to charge more for every choice and courage feels more expensive. But your fear is not a sign of weakness. It's your soul's way of asking for a new beginning. Financial loss doesn't just affect your wallet, it shakes your very identity. For years, you saw yourself as someone who had stability, control, plans. And suddenly, all of that was gone. When money disappears, it takes with it a piece of your ego, your self-esteem, and often your faith. Neuroscience shows that the emotional pain of losing something tied to our identity, such as status or lifestyle, is processed by the brain the same way as physical pain. In other words, the body reacts to financial loss as if it were a wound. And the more you ignore that pain, the more it accumulates, the more it paralyzes you, and the more it sabotages your restart. This fear brings deep consequences. First, it erodes self-confidence. You begin to doubt your own ability to prosper again. Second, it shrinks your vision of the future. Instead of dreaming, you focus only on surviving. Third, it weakens creativity, the very engine of prosperity. And fourth, it feeds an invisible cycle of self-punishment where the unconscious mind believes you no longer deserve to prosper, as if the fall had been a final sentence. And that's dangerous, because the mind begins to create the reality it believes it deserves. You start making smaller choices, thinking small, even sabotaging opportunities, not because you're incapable, but because, deep down, you're unconsciously trying to avoid feeling the pain of loss again. But there's a turning point. The understanding that a fall can be a portal. It isn't the end. It's the beginning of your financial and spiritual awakening. It can be the moment when you rebuild a life based on essence, not appearance. Look at history. Henry Ford went bankrupt twice before creating Ford. Walt Disney was fired for lacking creativity. Steve Jobs was removed from his own company and years later returned to revolutionize the world. They had something in common. They understood that losing is not failing, it's being redirected. Psychology calls this cognitive reframing, changing the meaning of an event and transforming it into learning. You can do the same with your financial story. Don't deny what happened. Look at it honestly and ask yourself, what did this experience come to teach me? What patterns in me still repeat when it comes to money? What do I need to understand so I don't live the same cycle again? Starting over doesn't begin in your wallet. It begins in your mind. Prosperity isn't about having again, it's about being again. Being more conscious, balanced, and wise. Being someone who has learned to prosper from the inside out. Being someone who recognizes their own value even when the bank balance is low. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman, winner of the Nobel Prize, showed that human beings feel the emotional impact of a financial loss as roughly twice as strong as the pleasure of a gain. That explains why financial trauma weighs so heavily and why emotional recovery takes time. But neuroplasticity shows that the brain can relearn. If you feed it with new beliefs, new images, and new decisions, it literally rewires your inner pattern of prosperity. And that's exactly what successful people do, often without realizing it. They reprogram their minds to trust again. Another important point comes from behavioral psychology. Our mind hates uncertainty. When we lose financial control, the brain switches into defense mode and starts seeking safety in anything, even in old habits that hold us back. That's why starting over requires a strategy, Small goals, concrete objectives, and consistent habits. The brain needs evidence to trust you again. So if you feel fear today, understand this. It's not the end. It's the sign of a rebirth. The first step is to stop fighting the past. You don't need to be who you once were. You need to become who you were meant to be now. Starting over isn't about reliving your old standard of living. It's about creating a new one. Maybe you no longer need the same things to feel fulfilled. Maybe what you once sought in material comfort can now be found in freedom, purpose, and inner peace. And when you release attachment, money begins to flow again. Money is energy. It moves where there is lightness, clarity, and movement. When you're trapped in fear, the flow stops. But when you choose trust, even without guarantees, the flow returns. Think about it. How many times has something that looked like the end actually been the beginning of something better? That job loss that opened a new path. That setback that freed you from what no longer made sense. Sometimes the universe needs to break you a little to remind you of the power that has always been within you. It's natural to feel shame or guilt, but emotions are not truths. They're signals. And when you listen to them consciously, they show you the way to healing. You are not the balance in your bank account. You are the strength that can rebuild it. You are not what you lost. You are the one who can create again. Pause for a moment. Breathe. Say to yourself, I forgive myself for not knowing how to do better. Repeat, I release the guilt for what has already passed. And affirm, I choose to prosper from the wisdom I've gained. Fear begins to dissolve when you face it with love. It doesn't disappear through formulas. It fades through clarity. When you understand that life doesn't punish you, it teaches you, fear loses its power. Starting over after 40 is different, yes, but it's also more conscious. You already know what doesn't work. You've already felt the weight of hurry, the cost of comparison. Now you can act with calm, strategy, and purpose. Start again. Not to prove anything to anyone, but to honor who you're becoming. Start again with less haste and more presence, with less fear and more wisdom, with less worry and more faith. Because starting over is courage, not failure. And courage is the first sign of prosperity. Those who feel fear and still take the next step are already winning. And maybe, if you're hearing this message, it's life telling you, you still can. You are still capable, and the best is yet to come. Tomorrow, the sun will rise. And when it does, it won't ask how much you've lost. It will simply remind you that there's still time. Time to create, to prosper, and to begin again. Because the true standard of living you need to reclaim is not the one money built, but the one that faith, courage, and awareness can rebuild within you. If this content resonated with you, take the next step. Check out the link I left below in the comments. And if this message helped you, give it a like, share it, leave your comment, and don't forget to subscribe with the bell on.